Okay, in terms of stuff, deadlines remain unchangified, so exam 2, covering part 2, and quizzes part 3, covering part 3, deadline November 16th, an end of day. Actually, I should be talking about exam 3, exam 4, quizzes part 4, December 7th, day they should live in infamy, and exam 5, deadlines at normal final time. But again, it's available online. For the paper, for the draft, November 9th, +5 deadline, November 14th on Blackboard, end of day. Emergency deadline for full credit, November 21st, end of day on Blackboard. And the desperation deadline, December 8th, also end of day, Blackboard. Nope, time is going fast. So very fast. Last time looking at our good dead friend Leibniz, talking about the monads. And now we turn to our good living friend, me, talking about ghosts and minds. Or maybe the trick is that I actually am dead, I've been a ghost all along.
Or that you just a mind.
True. I'm just a ghost. Now, although, if you look at human history, and every human culture, pretty much all through history and through all cultures, there is the notion of ghosts. Dead people that persist in remaining on the material plane beyond their death. To warn, to prophesy, to threaten, to kill, to do, to haunt, to weep. Now, surprisingly, despite the fact that ghosts have been around, seemingly forever, there really was no philosophical examination of ghosts. About the only reference to them was in Plato's Phaedo, in which he just sort of mentions ghosts hanging out, but then really doesn't do much with it. And I thought this is a terrible oversight, and so I wrote Ghosts and Monks. For a couple reasons. One was sort of on a bet to write on something.
No, you would.
Oh yeah, because people say like you can't get published on that. I'm like, hold my Gatorade. I shall publish this. But also, I thought there was a real dearth of coverage because it seemed like an interesting subject, a natural fit for philosophy of mind, but no one really had done anything with it. And my thought was probably that ghosts were seen as sort of like superstitious, pop culture, and it would be beneath the dignity of philosophy to even address it. And that seemed to me to have been a mistake. Now, it also provides a more interesting way, I think, than the usual way to look at philosophy of mind, rather than just, dry, dusty, here's the mind, here's the theory of mind, here's the theory of mind, but to look at them in terms of ghosts, of the afterlife.
So would it be, does a ghost have a mind, or was that the question?
And part of like what are ghosts? And given various theories of mind, what could ghosts actually exist? Could they be?
Or is it a figment of your imagination?
Yeah, or just all in your mind, the ghost mind. So the purpose of this bit, this essay, was to examine ghosts to illustrate various philosophies of mind, and to see, given a particular philosophy of mind, could ghosts be a possibility? Could they exist? And although people have been hunting ghosts for a long time and trying to bust them, we still don't have a good, any scientific evidence really for them. But also nothing decisive really against them. So neither proven nor disproven. Now, of course, to discuss ghosts, we need a definition of the term ghost. We need to know what we're hunting, or we're trying to find, the haunting things that we are hunting. Now, there's of course a great deal of literature on ghosts, and really no fixed scientific definition, because science really doesn't do ghosts, except to say, in terms of psychology, except people just thinking they see stuff, delusions, dreams, etc. But if you go through sort of the usual requirements for ghosts, one is of course that are ghosts alive? I mean, outside of Scooby-Doo. No, to be a ghost, you gotta be dead. Specifically, no, sad. Expo markers, the curse. Yeah, they are.
For this discussion, is there a difference between a ghost and a spirit?
Yeah, there could be, because we could have, when you talk about people like still alive, we often talk about them, people having spirits. We generally don't talk about people having like already having ghosts. So we don't, I mean, we could talk about people like we're always haunted, if we believe in the mind, that we have that our mind is a ghost. But yeah, spirits could be a separate thing. Spirits could be, we talk about like the Holy Spirit, but we don't, although sometimes they use the phrase Holy Ghost, which I always thought was kind of spooky.
Yeah.
So I always preferred Holy Spirit to ghost, but I'm not going to make any judgments against people. Yeah, so you could use spirit, although spirit also can imply non-ghost. You could be alive and have a spirit, and there could be spirits that aren't ghosts. They could be, like when people, mediums, contact the spirits, they need not like, they're kind of like phoning it in. So they wouldn't be ghosts because they're not here. Although, again, there's no like bureau of ghosty terms, so you could use spirit and ghost interchangeably if you wish. But the difference I make is that a spirit could be, embodied. So you could have, if you do have a soul, that would be a spirit in you, and spirits could be like in heaven and not here. But both it also ghosts would be dead. So you could be like a living spirit. So the ghost, the original body has to be dead, because that's how you ghost it. And ghosts, of course, are classified as undead, because they're dead but still supposedly doing stuff. Secondly, of course, ghosts are, because of the death of their original body, they're supposed to be disembodied. So it's supposed to be a mind. Because ghosts are supposed to retain, to be an actual ghost, they're supposed to retain like they're supposed to still be like people. Have memories, personalities, feelings, etc. And so they would be a mind. Now, in the literature and movies, etc., they're often presented as incorporeal, immaterial stuff. But we don't want to assume, because to do so would beg questions, we don't want to assume that ghosts must be philosophically non-material substances, that you couldn't have a physical ghost. Because if you just assume ghosts have to be immaterial substances, that would rule out ghosts that would be physical ghosts. So there'll be no assumption that they must be non-physical or physical.
Well, now, if you say you're going to rule out them not being non-material, I mean, how can they be dead or a mind if they have a physical body?
Well, we know the body can like die, assuming it's just purely physical, and it could be that ghosts are physical entities. So we don't want to assume they can't be somehow physical. So if you're like in a haunted house and someone came floating out, ooh, I am I am dead so and so, and you like scan them and said, they're made up of matter. They're not a ghost. And they'd be kind of like, well, yeah, they're made of matter, but they're all dead and floaty and stuff. So we don't want to assume that they can't be made of like some kind of weird matter. For example, in the 1920s, ectoplasm was a popular thing. It's some type of stuff, ghosty stuff, but it's not. I mean, it's something they claimed you could actually like. It was really not a real thing, but they claimed it was a physical substance you could like capture. You have like in a bottle or something. Yeah, so you don't want to assume that ghosts have to be non-physical. We don't want to assume that they can't be that. So we don't want to make the assumption either way. So being ghosts require dead, a mind, and also we also don't want to think of like heaven as full of ghosts, haunted heaven. That'd be kind of weird. So they also have to be here. They have to be in the world. And what also is kind of critical to ghosting is they have some sort of causal interaction with the physical world. Because again, like a spirit in heaven, we wouldn't call a ghost because they're a dead mind, but they're not here interacting with the world. Now, the causal interaction could be pretty minimal. For example, in the stories and in the stuff on the various ghost hunting shows, some of the things that ghosts do is, or in the movies, I mean, sometimes they do like full on, you know, like murdering people and stuff. But usually before they get up to the murdering, there's usually like some lowering temperatures, rattling things, closing doors, you know, that type of stuff. The classic poltergeist or noisy ghost. And so you could have ghosts that, you know, they can do fairly minor stuff. So those seem to be kind of the operating conditions for a ghost. Original body's got to be dead, they're a mind, they have some kind of causal interaction with the physical world. So if we accept that definition, and again, this could be disputed, because again, there's no Bureau of Standards of ghosts and spirits. There's just different views. So how would these fit or not fit into some classic theories of mind? Well, the first theory of mind to look at is a oldie but a baddie. And it's called identity theory. Now, identity theory is got the following stuff going on for it. In terms of our, you know, what type of stuff do they believe in? You know, do they believe in immaterial stuff? And the answer is no. It's a strictly materialist theory. Everything is matter. So what makes it identity theory? Well, it's kind of given away in the name. Identity theory takes the view that every mental state is identical to a state of the central nervous system. I mean, typically the brain. So what's a mental state? Well, a mental state is a state of the mind, whatever that is. And examples would be things, depending on like how fine you want to slice them, it could be something like feeling a pain. Or if you want to be more precise, like feeling the pain of a tack stuck in your pinky toe. Yeah. Or it could be like feeling hungry. Or it could be like feeling very hungry, thinking about pepperoni pizza. Or it could be something like thinking about the answer on a test, you know, you thought it was it. Or thinking that the capital of Maine is Augusta. And so it's just, you know, basically a thought, a belief, a feeling. Now, for the identity theorist, every mental state, every feeling, thought, belief, etc., is identical to the same thing as a state of the nervous system. So, for example, we could take like a particular pain, like the pain of stepping on a tack, just making it up. That could be neuron 1, 2, and 3 firing that order. So that is what pain of stepping on a tack is. The belief that Augusta is the capital of Maine may be neuron 365, 366, 367 firing. And that's what that is. So that firing would be that mental state would be that firing. So what you are, all your thoughts, beliefs, and feelings, is the central nervous system. Crudely put, you are your brain is you. I mean, when it's doing its stuff. Now, of course, this is a lot of appeal because, you know, believing in immaterial substances, that adds more stuff. We know we have brains. We know they like do mentally stuff. And so it's plausible. You know, that's what a thought, a belief, a feeling is.
Excuse me, so you say whatever the mental state of a man is, that's what he creates in his world?
Well, it would be the state of your brain.
Mm-hmm.
That would be like, the feeling of pain would be this. This is the feeling of pain, the feeling of pain is this. There's no, you know, immaterial substance.
Yeah, so the mind creates whatever is pain or pleasure.
Right, but your mind is your brain.
Yeah.
Your brain is your mind.
So whatever you're feeling, the scenario is that it's similar to what we were doing the other day, the last time. It's created in your mind.
Yeah, it would be, well, your mind would be your brain, your mind. So,
And the situation that's created is your mind that's doing it, so.
yeah. Yeah, so your brain is your mind is your brain. Now, this view, of course, again, has some appeal to it, but it's got some problems that soon became pretty clear. There are, of course, some philosophical objections, namely, if being in pain is those particular neurons firing, that means anything that doesn't have exactly those human neurons wouldn't feel pain.
Yeah, this seems like a very situational case, but you know, like that famous video, like the monk, he was protesting, he set himself on fire. How would that fit into this? Like, what was he feeling?
Oh, what?
Or was he just like that resolute?
Yeah, the identity theorists would say, you know, that would be the feeling of being on fire. This would be the resolution to not show pain. So they would have to say that anything that happens mentally is purely physical, purely neurochemical. And they could still account for, they wouldn't deny that people can have resolution or love. They would just say love is this, you know, literally a chemical romance. That, you know, courage is that cowardice is those neurons, that gentleness is this, that racism is that.
So love is a sorrow.
Yeah, love would be, you know, a neurochemical, it would be like those particular neurons fire. Now again, one problem with it is that if you go to the literal identity, that if people had, you know, if you have two people with different brain structures, if they're different, if you're able to, you know, do like MRI or imaging a person's brain, and this person, you know, you poke someone with a pinky with a tack, and their brain is slightly different, you'd say, well, they're not feeling, one of them's not feeling pain, which seems, you know, kind of weird.
So like if it's a person that has been poked with a tack a bunch of times before, so they built up a resistance to the pain, would that be?
Oh, they can handle that, because they would say, okay, they're getting less, the signal's less bright. But imagine someone with like their brain has a different structure. I mean, one example, which is pretty super weird, but in a way it kind of does in identity theory, is there's a condition, pretty serious condition, and the treatment for it is they literally remove half a person's brain.
What's a lobotomy?
Oh, not the thinky part.
Oh,
I mean, they did the bottom, that's the front part.
Okay.
But they take away half the person's brain, and it actually fixes the problem. Which is weird, because you'd think if you took half someone's brain, in fact, we saw people saying they have half a brain, you think they would basically be screwed. But if it's done young enough, the half of the brain compensates. And it's able to, I mean, there'll be a slight, you'll notice, like, we know that the brain controls the opposite side. So if someone loses, say, the right half of their brain, their left side won't be quite as dexterous, but they'll seem perfectly normal. Same, normal intelligence, normal abilities, etc. Yet they're missing all that stuff. And so by the identity theory, that shouldn't be possible. So identity theory does seem to have been, you know, refuted, because you can be in pain, but but be missing that part of your brain. So what does identity theory say about ghosts? Well, if you are your brain, when your brain goes, you go. Yeah, so there would be no.
So that's like when people are vegetables in the hospital and they're like they can't be woken up because their brain dead, even though their body's still.
Yeah. And if you are just your brain, when your brain is like rotted away, you're gone. There can't be any ghosts, because the ghosts would have to be, I mean, I guess the closest thing you can have to a ghost would be taking the brain out of the skull and just kind of, I don't know, waving it around or something. Like the, you know, but that probably wouldn't be a ghost, because the brain's not dead. Now you could have a zombie though, because that would be a dead brain that's still somehow, functioning and doing.
What was that? I think that was the season of The Walking Dead when they went to the Center for
Oh, yeah.
Disease Control, and they said that the only thing active was, I forget which part of the brain. But
Yeah, the lizard part.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I thought a zombie was just like a corpse, like it was just like a shell just acting, just doing like, I guess, a word to say is like default controls without any higher thinking.
Yeah, I mean, there's different, there's the classic supernatural zombie, which is, in a way, is the best kind because you just say magic. You don't have to explain about how any of that works. It's just like, it's, anime dead, boom, it's zombies running around, it's magic. Yeah, if you try to be scientific, though, it becomes a real problem because if, like in The Walking Dead, if you say, well, everything in the brain is dead except for that little bit, but then why don't they starve? You know, or freeze to death?
Exactly.
You know, because I guess they could eat, they eat sometimes, but they would, depend, like if they were in, you know, because I was thinking, like, what happens to the ones that are in New England during the winter? They just, or here, like in the south in the summer.
Yeah.
They would just, without air conditioning, without water, they just overheat. And then, you know, they get infected with, you know, they get taken over by maggots and they wouldn't last.
Yeah.
So the best explanation is always magic. You know, or just not, just don't try to explain it.
Like, what about, like, you know how they say like they don't need to swim, they can just walk
Yeah.
underwater, but the density of a person is less than the density of water.
Oh, the fat, the muscle is higher density.
But still, like, whenever you drop someone in the water, they tend to float.
Yeah. Yeah, so probably, yeah, so a typical zombie would have a hard time walking I mean, they would need to breathe, but they would need something to weight them down so they could actually walk. Because that's why divers would wear, you know, the old, you know, hard helmet divers, they'd have the lead boots, to sink them. Yeah, so they would be kind of bobbing in the water. And I guess they'd try to kind of zombie swim. And yeah, they would have a hard time actually walking without weights, walking on the bottom. And of course, they would need to think of that. You know, that requires some planning, like, oh, I can walk on the bottom, and I can reach that obstacle. I mean, zombies in the movies just do whatever they need to do for the plot. You know, they're as smart or stupid as they need. And also, if you think about it, if they still have parts of the brain functioning, why would they be attacking other humans and not each other? You know, because what would be this? You know, or why would they?
There's always like an explanation, like if it's like a virus, like World War Z,
yeah,
something like that, then the virus knows not to attack someone who's been infected. It only knows to attack like
Yeah, it's
uninfected
like in The
people.
Walking Dead when they cover themselves with the muck of a zombie.
which is pretty impressive considering humans have terrible senses. That would, you know, how would you know that someone else was?
Exactly.
It's like the sense of the virus, of
Yeah,
what's
but-
infected, but that doesn't.
Yeah. They don't have senses.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's whatever the plot requires. I mean, zombies are cool. I mean, I like them. But
Y'all actually watch horror pictures.
oh yeah, I write that stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah, my
Did you
zombie.
see Hereditary? I haven't watched it yet. Was it good?
I don't know. I haven't seen it.
Okay, I haven't seen it. Everyone says it's like the scariest movie, but.
I don't know if I'd say scary.
Okay.
What movie?
Hereditary.
Is it about family Thanksgiving with your family? That
What do
is
you know,
scary.
I think?
The racist uncle. Can't believe I'm related to this guy. So
Y'all just watch people that would get slaughtered though. That's not real.
Oh no, gore is different from horror.
Yeah, there's
I
gore.
would say.
Hereditary has gore.
yeah, there's
Yeah.
gore, horror, suspense. You know, because some of the most terrifying movies and stories, you don't see any blood. For instance,
Yeah.
they won The Haunting of Hill House, the original, not the remake.
Mhm.
Is an incredibly good movie. But at the end, you don't even know if there really is a ghost or anything. It's all done through the good acting, imagine that, and sound effects. And they remade it. The remake was terrible because they decided to go all special effect.
I think Netflix made a remake for it.
Yeah, they did a TV show on it. There's Haunting of Hell House, Haunting of Hill House. The original movies, the one with Roddy McDowell, was a really good one too. Like a lot of the 70s, they had a lot of really bad horror, but a lot, because they didn't have, ironically, because they didn't have the money for all, and they didn't have the effects, they had to actually rely on story. So if you have a really good horror movie, it's really good because they had to really write.
The worst one I've seen was Satan's Son, and after I saw that, I didn't look at no more hard.
Well, don't go with the worst ones.
I'm saying it was a good show. It was scary after that, cause what's the called when she turns her head around?
Oh, Exorcist.
It was. When I was young, it was scary, but after I grew up, it wasn't.
Yeah, it's not scary.
This
anymore.
was terrible.
Yeah, scary then. Well, less scary now. Everything's more scary. Actually, because the world's worse, everything's more scary.
Exactly.
Thrill the news for a thrill.
Yeah, it's like desensitization. So one obvious way we get ghosts is use the theory in which I always say, you know, we got physical stuff and ghostly stuff. And that, of course, is our good friend, substance dualism. Now that view, of course, you got a body, but you are a,
Yeah.
you are a mind. Now, so as we saw when we talked about our good data for Descartes and others, you have two types of stuff: material, physical objects, and then, of course, you have the immaterial mind. Now, since the mind is immaterial and different from the body, what could happen on this view if your body dies?
Keeps on.
Yeah, your mind could keep on going because they're separate things. It's not guaranteed, but it's a possibility because it's a separate substance. And it could stay here. And of course, in the original body, if you believe, you know, in dualism, the mind is somehow controlling the body. So in a way, we're all haunted by our bodies are haunted by us. We're the ghost. And so if you lose your body, the mind, you know, it can already, if you believe in dualism, it already can control physical objects, so it could somehow influence physical objects in the world. And so obviously, substance dualism makes ghosts totally possible, because in fact, it's what we normally think of when we think of ghosts. We think of an immaterial mind, you know, that ghosts, I talk about it being, you know, ghosty stuff, etc. So if substance dualism is true, then ghosts are a real possibility. And this is what give us our, you know, our classical immaterial ghost. So if you want ghost, best option. Also, if you want immortality of any kind, best option.
So according to you and your ghost in mind, do you think that if ghosts were real, they would take the form of the other people that actually died?
Well, yeah, because the kind of the classic view of ghost stories and sightings of ghosts, they do look like the people they were. You know, because they say they see, you know, a figure that looks like, you know, someone dressed like in a Civil War uniform or World War I uniform. And they
But
look
I'm
like,
saying if they took on a body form, you know how you're just saying you don't excuse them not
so-
having a body. So if they took on a form, a material form, do you think they would look like the person that they looked like before?
that's the usual claim. Although there are stories where ghosts, they look exactly like normal people. Then there's also ones where they look like they died violently. They look kind of distorted. Have you ever seen like Ghostbusters?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that obviously it's not scientific, but that gives you kind of the range. Some look just like normal people, just kind of like translucent, and others look very distorted. Then there are views that, I mean, of course, there's a view of like, you know, figure under a sheet type of deal. And there are even views that ghosts don't look anything like humans. They might be like lights or something. And so they could, if they're able to be seen, it would make sense that if you were a ghost, you'd try to recreate your original appearance, either consciously or subconsciously. Maybe. Or they may be completely invisible, because it's like again, in a lot of movies, the ghosts are not visible, just their effects are. Now, in addition to substance dualism, there's also another type of dualism, what's called property dualism. Now, this view, they don't accept substances. So what they do accept, though, is properties. It's like a bundle. So on this view, the mind and body are different. They're not the same, but there's categories of properties, not substance. So the idea would be to draw it kind of badly, this would be like the brain, physical brain, would be made of physical properties. And then the mind wouldn't be a separate substance, it would be made of mental, I'll draw it right here, mental properties. And so they're different types of properties, but they're not different types of stuff, different types of substances. Now, if there are two main flavors of this, lobster and the first one is what's called Epiphenomenalism. Now, this view came about because of the mind-body problem. You know, on the classic Cartesian view, you've got a two-way interaction between mind and body. So, you know, one example would be like you step on something with your foot, it sends a pain signal to your mind, and then you, ow, so then you cause your body to react. So, two-way street. Now, one thing that people proposed as a solution was, hey, we can solve it by making it one way. So the idea on this view, epiphenomenalism, epi meaning like above, is that mental properties are caused by physical properties, and the mind doesn't do anything, so it's a one-way causal interaction. So all your thoughts, feelings, and beliefs, they're not identical to your brain, but they're caused by your physical properties. So particular physical properties occurring in your brain lead to mental properties. But the mental properties in turn don't cause stuff. Now you might say, well, what about like when I feel pain and I react? Well, the epiphenomenalist would say, like, here is, you get a signal of pain, and that causes, you know, feeling of pain. And then your physical properties react to move your foot, pull it away, and then you get a signal sent to your mental properties informing your foot is being pulled away.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like you're sitting in a room with no controls and you're just getting reports, but you don't have any controls. You're just like a passenger listening to what's going on.
Wait, but what about people with mental health disorders like depression, or even when you get like a tension headache or like a stress-related headache, stuff like that?
Oh, that would also be like depression would be here. So you'd have something happening in the physical properties, and that would cause depression, and the mental properties. Then the depression.
But what would be the physical properties of the depression?
Oh, it'd be. Well, in fact, that's what scientists now claim. That depression is a neurochemical imbalance. And so, if you were a property dualist, you would say you have a neurochemical imbalance, and that causes the mental state of depression. Now, the depression, the mental state doesn't cause anything, but the physical states would cause other things to happen. So, in a way, again, to use an analogy, it's like your mind. It's like you are like sitting in a room with no controls, but you're getting reports and everything. So you're hearing like of all the stuff that's happening, but there's nothing you can do. Or to use an analogy to like with a ship, it's like you're sitting there watching the damage control reports during a battle, but you have no controls. You just see like, you know, ship is on fire, except it hurts. You know, except it actually, you feel the pain. And so all the stuff that's actually going on goes on in the physical property, the body, and all you're getting in a way is reports. You're just feeling. Now it feels like you're in control because your physical properties are in control, but the mind on this view doesn't cause anything. So the mental properties depend on physical properties. Now when I originally wrote this, my view was that if the physical properties go, like you die, and all the mental properties depend on the physical properties, then to use an analogy, what happens to the sparks when the sparkler burns out? Yeah, they're gone. And these are like, metaphorically speaking, sparks. But then, last year, when I taught this class, someone brought up the example of, in Supernatural, the TV show, that one way if you've seen the show, how do they get rid of ghosts? out of Sam and Dean take care of the ghost. Surefire way. Literally surefire. Literally fire. Yeah, what they do is they go and dig up, you know, the kind of thing is it's a ghost. We gotta find his body, Sam, we gotta dig it up and burn it. And they go and dig up the body and they salt it and burn it. And the idea being that on that view, you could still have property dualism and have ghosts. The thing is that the remains, like the skull or bones or whatever, they would, you know, the brain is gone, but there'd still be a physical properties that could somehow sustain the mental properties. And so on the supernatural metaphysics, the ghost is still connected to the body. So the body's dead, and but the mental properties depend on the physical properties, because just fully destroying the body somehow, like being dead is not enough, but somehow burning it takes care of it.
Well, like, I'm trying to figure out, like, what sense does that make? Because if it's a ghost, it means it's now independent of it. Like, it can move around without a physical body. And that kind of makes me ask the question, like, if the ghost is still around, why doesn't it reanimate its own body?
Yeah, I mean,
Because it does things.
yeah, good question. I mean, one thing may be that the, yeah, just speculation. It could be that the body being dead, it can't actually reanimate it because there's no muscles and so forth. So the ghost itself can't actually, you know, it'd be too much work in a way to kind of like walk around manipulating it. Or if the ghost can manipulate stuff directly, why go and get the body? Doesn't give any advantage. So it could be that maybe it can't actually, it's not capable of actually physically, you know, reoccupying the body. Or it may be that it'd just be too difficult, you know, kind of pointless to be like, you can actually do kind of a comedy episode. The ghost is like, trying to like, goddamn it, like, trying to like figure out how to work it, like, screw this, I'm just gonna ghost.
But I was saying that like the ghost is manipulating the mental capacity of things to cause things to work. And all you're saying, the only way to kill it is to burn the remains of the original body.
Oh, that's what they say in the show. Now, it could be that there's somehow, I mean, you could just say magic. Or you could say that there is, that in a way the show is materialistic, that ghosts, in a way, and they get destroyed. You know, and when they get burned, the bones burned up, they show the ghost being destroyed. So that would be consistent with this Epiphenomenalism, that somehow the mental properties,
separate.
yeah, they require, I mean, to use an analogy, you could think of like, normally we're like a laptop, you know, the screen of the laptop. But when you die and become a ghost, you can think of like, there's the remains, here's the ghost kind of projecting them. And so if you destroy the projector, you destroy the ghost. And so that's one way. I mean, I'm sure the reason why they did it, of course, was for the plot. You know, that's the reason, you know, how do we find a way for them to destroy a ghost that allows us to conveniently put like one brother in danger and have a heroic rescue? Oh, let's have him burn the body. But in a way, you could make sense with this theory, because if you need like a physical foundation for your ghosty existence, which is what this requires, then you could have Epiphenomenalism with a weird sort of ghost. It would fit the supernatural metaphysics. So I used to say there weren't enough ghosts on this view, but that was pre-supernatural, so there could be ghosts. Now, a second type of property dualism is interactionism. Namely, you get the physical properties and mental properties, and it's a two-way street. So going back to your question about depression, you could have like neurochemical problems that cause a feeling of depression, and then the depression could cause things in the body, you know, like more depression. And so you could have them interacting with each other. Now this is kind of our common sense view, that you have thoughts, beliefs, and desires that aren't the same thing as your neurochemistry, but we believe they are connected. We believe like you can treat depression to some degree with chemicals, but not perfectly. We also think that by like meditating and so forth, that can affect the without accepting like, you know, a whole separate ghost, you know, ghosty thing, you have mental properties and physical properties.
Oh.
Now, in this view, you could then have ghost, because it's a two-way street. The mental properties do interact with the physical properties, but they don't require them. So it's like your cell phone, you know, calling another cell phone. They interact, but one doesn't require the other. So you could lose your original body, but your mental properties could somehow keep persisting. Now, they might require some physical system, perhaps, which is why, you know, going back to the supernatural thing, maybe they have some connection to the original bones, or they may need like an object to connect to, or they may help explain why hauntings are often kind of local. You typically don't have ghosts that like travel around the country. They're typically like in the house or a ship connected to one object or place.
So needing some sort of physical body, is that the Conjuring where they use the doll as conduit?
Yeah.
So it's like that, okay.
Yeah, so maybe I mean, yeah, like standard kind of thing in horror movies is, well, like Chucky, you know, the Child's Play, that it needs a physical vessel. It doesn't have to be the original one, but the mental properties have to connect to something physical. Yeah, so maybe that's required. Or maybe that can free float on its own. It doesn't, you know. But this would be, you know, consistent with the fictional ghost stories. And
That reminds me of this movie. Have you heard of this movie called The Boy? Yeah, it's called The Boy. It's like one of those movies where it has like the old looking doll, and like the ghost is like controlling the doll. So it just made me think of that. Like, does that have something to do with it?
yeah, because it's kind of a standard horror movie trope that you've got a doll that's got a spirit in it. That actually probably goes back to the metaphysics, maybe the movies don't do it intentionally, but it goes back to the Egyptian view of the soul, that one part of the soul, actually the soul of multiple parts for the Egyptians, and there was a type of soul, I think it's the Ka, that could come back and it could inhabit images of the person, images of the dead person. And in some cases, if they like the person, they would make like kind of like a mannequin. That could be, you know, the belief was that the spirit could come back and occupy it and move it around. And if they didn't like the person, they'd make an image, but they'd make it so it couldn't move around because they were worried that they might come back and do bad stuff. Yeah, so the idea that spirits can come and inhabit mannequins, dolls, and objects goes back to at least the ancient Egyptians. And then maybe the people who did movies like Boy or The Conjuring or Chucky, maybe they got the idea. Or maybe they're just because dolls are freaking creepy, and they just thought that would be super.
Those stories are terrible.
Yeah,
You
super.
said
I don't know
something.
about it either. No, go ahead, go ahead.
You were saying something about if the mind did linger, maybe they have to exist on some other substance or object. Then for it to interact with people, wouldn't you have to clone somebody or something?
Well, it depends on how, like, the mental properties interact with stuff. So maybe something minor, like you have an object, like a room that feels like there's a presence there. Maybe that's all the ghost can do. Or like in the movies, like you could have the ghost is somehow like connected to the house, and then it's able to like maybe move stuff or, you know, lower the temperature or slam doors or something. Now the last philosophy of mine, the most recent, is what's called functionalism. Now functionalists tend to be materialists, but they don't actually have to. What makes functionalism is this. With identity theory, as we saw, being in pain, for example, particular pain, would be identical to a neural state. So you have to have that neural state to be in pain. Being in pain is a neural state. And the problem was, of course, if you have anything that's different from that, then it can't be pain. Now the functionalists came along, and their contribution, basically they copied how computers work. Namely, the way the mind works is mental states are not defined in terms of identity. So it's not that pain is those neurons firing in that order. They define it in terms of functions. Namely, you can think of it like a black box. You get an input and you get the output. So if you get the same or similar input, if you get the similar output from a similar input, then that would be pain, regardless of what's in the box. Now, where they got this idea was from back when personal computers were becoming a thing. And IBM built one of the earliest, personal computers, the IBM, PC. And they made the mistake of thinking software didn't matter, it's the hardware that matters. So they hired Bill Gates to write DOS. That meant that IBM owned the hardware patents and copyrights, but not the software. So then when other companies came along, and they wanted like Compaq, which I don't think it exists anymore, and they wanted to make PCs. But they couldn't duplicate the hardware of IBM because copyright patents. And they wanted to be able to run like DOS and run programs. So how do you do that? How do you make a computer that doesn't violate IBM's patents but still runs programs? Because you don't want to have to create like your whole new operating system. So what they did is they cloned it. And what they would do is they'd get one team and they'd have the team figure out all the inputs and outputs from the IBM. And then they would have a clean team, they'd hand off to the clean team all that information. And what the clean team would do is they would try to recreate all those inputs and outputs without duplicating the hardware. So they would use completely like a different hardware design and layout than the IBM machine. But it would be not copyright violating or patent violating because it's not physically the same. But what it can do is, you put in DOS, it will install, because as far as DOS is concerned, all DOS cares about is not the hardware, it cares about the inputs and outputs. Is it getting the right inputs and outputs? And so they put it in, it installs, and you're running DOS on a clone, even though it doesn't violate the IBM patents.
You even deal with DOS anymore?
Yeah, if you're running Windows 10, there's still DOS in there.
Really?
You go to the command prompt, it runs all the old DOS stuff. Yeah, it's in there.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so you can still do all that stuff. Yeah, it's under the command prompt on even Windows 10, it's there. And so for the functionalists, their view is the mind is not that particular hardware, it's those inputs and outputs. So anything that can duplicate those inputs and outputs would be the mind. Now, what is this?
One question. You say it's just popped into my mind. The flash drive, the floppy disk. Do you, saying that you concoct your own stuff, do you have a way of connecting your floppy disk to your computer today?
I got a USB floppy disk. I keep one on hand just in case.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
Do you all know what a floppy disk is?
Yeah, everyone. They're not that young.
Pretty good for looking at the sun.
Now, how does this relate to ghosts? Well, what can happen is, if you're a materialist functionalist, right now your brain is a computer running you, the program that is you. Now, what could happen if you're a functionalist, and they've written, they explicitly have written articles about this, if they could duplicate all the inputs and outputs of you, all your functional states, and duplicate it onto a computer, that would be you. So after your original body dies,
It's like that movie Transcendence.
yeah, if all your inputs and outputs, or Ghost in the Shell, if all your inputs and outputs are in place, that entity is, a mind that's been disembodied by the death of its original body, but it still keeps on existing. It could literally be a ghost in the machine.
Well, see, now that's dealing with what I'm dealing with in this story. So I've been wondering how can I, because that's why I asked you, would they have to choose the same body type, or the same reaction, the same body as the other one, to function in this life.
Yeah, but there are practical questions, like could you, like, would being inside a computer like mess you up? Or change you or make you not the same person? Would you need like, to get like a similar sort of body to retain your sense of identity?
That's my question.
Yeah, or, you know, could you have a very different body and still retain, or would you start changing? But you could have, you know, a special sort of ghost. Now, one problem for this, of course, is you could do this while a person is still alive and duplicate their, you know, inputs and outputs. So that would be a very weird sort of, it wouldn't be a ghost in this case, because the person is not dead. And of course, you can have, you know, whatever makes you you and not something else, so this can't be you, which creates a bit of a problem.
Wait a minute now, because you done messed me up now. Because you say nine, that's you because you're still alive.
Right, because there will only be one of you. So it never was, even if you died, it wouldn't be you.
It'd be like a carbon copy.
Yeah, it'd be a copy of you, but you could argue, well, there can't be two of me, there can only be one of me. So whatever makes me, there can only be one of those things.
But your essence was backed up on that thing, on that disk.
Or whatever.
And then they created another you.
Yeah, I mean, functionalists do make the argument that it would be you because, contrary to the normal view of personal identity, that there can only be one you, they consider maybe there could be multiple yous, that each one has an equivalent claim to being you, in which case you got backups. It all depends on what your intuition is about how many yous there can be of you. My intuition is there can only be one of me, but I think the world would be better with more of me, lots more. Lots and lots.